Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Tim McGuinness. I'm the Managing Director of the Society of Citizens Against Relationship Scams, a government-registered, government-partnered, crime victims assistance and crime prevention nonprofit organization based in Miami, Florida, with offices in Monterrey, Mexico, Monterrey, Nuevo Leon, Mexico as well. Today, I'm very pleased to have joining me one of our other SCARS directors, Debby Montgomery Johnson. Hello, Debby.
Hi, Tim.
And we have a wonderful guest today, Erin West, who is a prosecutor in the state of California. Erin, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a treat to be able to speak with you both and learn from your experiences.
And we're particularly interested from the prosecutor's perspective about the absolute explosion in cyber-enabled crime, from romance scams to what we refer to as urgency scams, such as grandparent scams, phone scams, lotto scams, the total spectrum. These are all what we refer to as relationship scams. And what we mean by a relationship scam is one where there is essentially a one-on-one trust relationship between the victims and the criminals who perpetrate these acts, the predators who steal the life savings of individuals, who destroy futures, and based upon our own estimations, take as many as 20 lives a day from victims who cannot sustain the trauma that they've received from these acts and take their own lives. Debby, perhaps you'd like to begin this.
Well, I'm really excited about this because when I was taken as a victim back in 2010, 2012, it was 2 years, I went to report it. And the first thing I heard was, we can't do anything about it. There's nothing we can do. And that came from the FBI, which surprised me because I figured they could do anything. Again, my guy who confessed, I saw him in person after 2 years. He was actually sitting in Nigeria. I had no idea about that. So they said, if you can get him here to the States, we can help you. Otherwise, sorry. That shut me down as far as a victim and looking for any sort of reparations, any sort of help. And I'd had a little bit of legal background in my early years, a little bit of banking background. I had some really great experience, but when I heard we can't help you, I just put up that mask and I became what I called the woman behind the smile. And I'd never heard of scams prior to that. I was interviewed by the Palm Beach Post, and that's how I was connected with Dr. McGuinness and SCARS. I'd never heard of SCARS before, this back again in 2012. A lot has come about in the last 10 years. But many of the victims and the survivors, as we call them, as I call them, don't have any idea what the prosecutor's office can do. And it wasn't until I was in Texas about a year ago, representing SCARS and being there for one of our victims, where I saw the incredible work that the prosecutor did in Texas, Northern District of Texas. And that's what I want to explore with you, is how we can get the word out that reporting and speaking about this and not hiding is really important in order for you to do your job and to find some sort of justice for us. So that was kind of a roundabout way to say thank you for what you're doing. It's important. And we need to let our survivors know that what we tell you will have an effect someday. And may not put money back in our pockets, but it might stop the next person from being hurt. So thank you so much.
Erin, you know, one of the things that is very challenging that we've been fighting since SCARS came into existence, which was about 8 years ago when I created SCARS, is this notion that the police and the criminal justice system do nothing. Now, we know that this is not true, but we also know that the criminal justice system is incredibly hindered by a simple fact, that the FBI estimates that only about 3% of victims report these crimes. We actually estimate it to be much lower. We think it's actually about 1% of these crimes are reported. And in that respect, It's much the same kind of situation that we faced ourselves with a couple of generations back with other kinds of profoundly traumatizing crimes, such as sexual assault and domestic abuse. So we think this is an evolution, but a big part of this is letting the victims know that the criminal justice system is very active. It is working aggressively. We know that the number of arrests are skyrocketing. This started with the last administration, is continuing now, everywhere from China to South Asia to the Middle East to Nigeria, almost doubling the number of arrests on an annual basis. Number of incarcerations. Literally, Nigeria's run out of prison space because of this. But we know it's also being done in the United States, but it's quite hindered. So maybe you can first talk to us a little bit. Obviously, you can't talk about ongoing cases, but maybe you can talk about cases that have been successfully investigated and prosecuted to give our listeners, the million or so victims that we reach every year, a better idea of how hard the criminal justice system really is working.
I really appreciate the opportunity to do this. I made some notes while you guys were talking, because you hit on so many of the key points that I always try to stress whenever I have the opportunity to be heard. So I think the number one point that you guys raise, and that is so key, is just educating the public about what these scams are. Because
Erin, before you go on, could you please tell us where you are a prosecutor and your role, because we didn't give you an opportunity to really introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Erin West. I'm a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County, California. We are located in the middle of the state. We include the city of San Jose. We are just south of San Francisco. I have been a prosecutor. This will be my 24th year. I have done all kinds of different work in the prosecutor's office. I spent 9 years in sexual assault. For the past 5 years, I have been doing exclusively high-tech crimes. I work with a task force called the REACT Task Force. It's made up of officers from a number of different agencies in my area, and they're all local agencies, but we also have federal partners, including the U.S. Secret Service. So that enables us to have some international reach, which is key to being able to deal with some of these scams. Over the past 5 years, I feel like the number of these scams have dramatically increased. And I feel like particularly in the last month, they have exploded. And I can't even begin to tell you how frequently we are hearing about scams in the cryptocurrency world, where the origin is trust in a relationship. And one of the things that you brought up is, I noticed when I was preparing for this today, I looked at your page, and I really appreciate that you front the number of suicides that are attributable to this crime. I think one of the fights that we fight in prosecuting these cases is that the judges and the defense say, oh, this is a white collar crime, somebody lost their money. But I think when we look particularly at relationship scams, we are looking at a totally different animal. We are looking at a situation where a victim has put their trust, their energy, their heart in the hands of someone, of a bad actor using it only for evil. So there's the trauma of realizing that this relationship that had held such a special place turns out to be completely false, combined with a situation where, at least in these new ones I'm seeing, the victim believes that they are learning something from from an educated person. They are learning a way to invest in cryptocurrency, and there's sort of an endorphin rush that goes along with learning something new, being successful at something new, feeling as though the victim has achieved something that perhaps their peers haven't, and that they, you know, I think the devastation of these crimes can't be underestimated, because when the rug is pulled from these victims and they realize that not only was this relationship absolutely false, they've also lost so much money, and oftentimes they've brought other family members in and sort of misled them a little bit to try and cover up some of the red flags that they may have been seeing. It's a tragedy, and the number of suicides that are attributable to it is something that we can't overlook. This is a serious crime. This is not something that is a white collar crime, no big deal. These people could probably afford to lose the money. This is a situation of life and death. I have a girlfriend who reached out to me last week, and she's a therapist, and she said, "Are you familiar with these pig butchering scams?" And I said, "That is my current passion. That is all I am working on right now." And she says, "Well, I have a couple of victims, and they are devastated and suicidal, and completely traumatized." And so I think another point that you brought up, Dr. McGuinness, is the concept that they're not reporting. And I think that feeds into the whole trauma as well, is people are humiliated because not only did it's not like they made a bad investment, it's that they were completely duped and their heart was pulled from them as well.
Yes. Feel free to tell your friend that we do offer professionally managed peer-to-peer support groups, unlimited for as long as the victims need it, of nothing but fully qualified screened scam victims. By screen, I just mean we don't allow people into our group who are hostile, aggressive, or are, of course, fake.
Right.
And
Right.
we've had a little under 12,000 victims go through our support and recovery programs. And we do this all online for their convenience, because in our groups, we have people literally from around the globe. Every gender, every race, every religion, every culture. And one of the really interesting things that we find is that there is so little difference between people when they're at this stage. Now, one of the things that we've learned about, what was it, about a year ago, Debby and I participated in aiding National Geographic in the development of a series. So they went to Ghana and they interviewed the scammers. This is an interesting point from a prosecutorial point of view. The scammers are fully aware that victims commit suicide. So it's not that they can claim, "Oh, we didn't know, we didn't do anything." They went into this knowing that this was a life and death situation.
Well, the other thing that I want to mention too, as you were speaking, Erin, I was hearing, and I saw this in Dallas when I was out in the court out there.
In the federal court trial of a scammer who was sentenced for 14 years.
And the reason he was sentenced for 14 years is because the judge, one of our survivors presented an impact statement. 88 victims were there, only one gave a statement, and it was her. But her statement, when I talked to the prosecutor prior to the judge ruling, they thought maybe they could get 5 years. After the judge heard her statement and saw that it was a crime against the elderly, because most of the victims were over 60, he upped it to 14. And the guy got 14 in the end. We were also grateful that sitting beside us, ICE was there in the event he got out. They were going to pick him up. But what I wanted to say is that there's in law enforcement, we've seen in the past a lot of minimizing the impact this has on victims and the maximizing of the victim blame. And that's when and I've dealt with this every time I go into the media. I get trolls hitting on me. But that shuts victims down. They are not going to want to speak to anybody until they know that what they're going to say is going to have an impact on the outcome. And it's difficult.
That's such an important point. And I can, first of all, what a fantastic result in the Texas case, and what an illustrative way of showing the value of cultivating relationships between law enforcement and our victims, and giving victims the opportunity to be heard.
Yes.
I think that frequently you've raised a number of issues that I wanted to talk about, and one of them, which I will talk about.
The floor is yours.
Okay, but I want to make sure I hit them all. But so let's talk about the victim blame. So that is a horrific part of this in terms of how this often gets prosecuted. So I prosecuted a number of cases where victims, it's SIM swapping. I don't know if you're familiar with SIM swapping. So it's not so much a relationship scam, but what it is a completely unwitting victim who goes to sleep one night, wakes up the next day, and has lost their entire savings. And with this advent of cryptocurrency, there never was a way before that a thief could literally take all of your money. With cryptocurrency, they can. Before, if it was in a bank, the bank would have to make good on it. With cryptocurrency, when it's gone, it's gone. So what I dealt with during those cases was victims who never intended to be victims. They weren't engaged in anything, and all of a sudden, all their money was lost. And because it was the early days of cryptocurrency, judges were not willing to, they did not give the victims a lot of deference. I remember one time I was talking about the victim wants to come in and be heard, and they said, oh, the victim can come off their yacht this weekend to come talk to us. And I think that there's so much education that has to be done toward the defense and toward the judges to explain this happens to very normal people. This happens to very rich people. This happens to just getting by people. This happens to, just like you were saying,
of every demographic and age group.
All of it, yes. And victim blaming isn't fair in this situation where we have, as you demonstrated in Ghana, a complete lack of consideration of the people they are harming. So I think that's something I really focus on, and the way we get there is by developing the relationships with the victims. So let me go back to one of the key things that you said at the beginning is that there's a concept that police are doing nothing. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So I think it's important to understand that I am a local prosecutor. I work for the County of Santa Clara. So my jurisdiction is somewhat limited, but I am still able to have a very big impact. So a lot of victims will immediately think that this must be a federal case, and they report to the federal government. And that's one way of going about it. I think that oftentimes, especially in these most recent pig butchering scams, there are so many of them, so many victims, and they report to the FBI, they file something on IC3, and they just really don't hear back. And they feel, I can only imagine how they feel overlooked. And
if you'd allow me to interject for a second. Early last year, we filed a formal complaint with the Ombudsman and the Inspector General of the Department of Justice and the Inspector General of the FBI over violation of federal victims' rights. Because exactly as you say, when someone files a complaint with IC3, they never hear anything back. And that is a violation of federal victims' rights. They're supposed to be informed of the status of any case. They're supposed to be informed about their rights as a victim. They're supposed to be connected potentially with advocates that can aid them in understanding the process and what services may be available. I know California has an excellent victims' rights statute. But yes, this is a big part of the problem. And unfortunately, in this space, we're the only global organization supporting victims of cyber-enabled crime, the UN term for them, worldwide. So we're very aware of all of these issues, and we advocate for victims on both the local, federal, and global nature. And when we tell victims to report these crimes, we always tell them report to your local police first. Get that police report number, because that enables any services or benefits that the victim may be able to take advantage of. Sorry for the interruption.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm grateful we've made this connection, because this is something I've become passionate about, because I can see very clearly a problem that is happening. And the problem that is happening is victims are devastated. They are barely hanging on, and in that same time period are reaching out for assistance and not hearing anything, which only increases their frustration and devastation. They may go to a local law enforcement agency, and if they're even able to talk to someone in person, that person will likely say, in the United States right now, we don't know how to handle right now I'm talking about the pig butchering crimes, where and do we all understand that term, where
This is a hybrid of a romance scam and a cryptocurrency investment scam, and it's an evolutionary change in relationship scams in that it eliminates what used to be a case where a romance scammer would create a set of emergencies or urgent situations that the victim would send money for. Instead, all they have to do is develop a friendship or a romance and make a recommendation about an investment. So it's a different level of a trust relationship, vastly easier for scammers to execute.
Absolutely, because there's less day-to-day trickery in terms of creating these emergency situations that have to be handled. There's more of a portrayal of the scammer as a very successful, likable person, and you can be like me if you do this investment that I'm talking to you about.
Right.
So back to this overall problem I'm seeing is the victims reach out and are turned away. And I think this is happening on the local level because local agencies just have not caught up with cryptocurrency. And I think it's a major issue. These scams aren't going away. They're only increasing. And so what I've been doing is I've been trying, it's what we're talking about on this broadcast today, is that let's keep talking about it. Let's keep making sure people understand what this crime is. And I think, Dr. McGuinness, you just explained it in a very easy to understand format. I try to explain to local law enforcement that this is the same crime you've always investigated. This is same as go get some Apple gift cards and read me the back of them. This is the same as my daughter, I have your daughter, please send. I mean, this is the same as everything.
It's fraud.
It's fraud. It's fraud. It's just a new way of getting your money. And crypto's not that complicated. It just isn't. Like
No.
I think people are scared to death of it, and so they just say we can't handle it, and so that enables the level of fraud that we're seeing. So I've been talking about it on LinkedIn. I've been talking about it at conferences, and and as a result, people are reaching out to me with their crimes, and I'm desperately trying to find homes for these victims. And I think what I've been seeing is I'm reaching out, one-on-one with local prosecutors and saying, what are you doing with crypto? Where are you with this? I've got a case. I want you to take this. And they're generally, I would say, interested and receptive, but lacking the knowledge, and unfortunately lacking the tools, the expensive tools that enable us to do this kind of work. So that's a frustrating piece. Being able, we talked a little bit about, well, what can local law enforcement do? And I can only imagine how that must have felt, Ms. Montgomery Johnson, when they said, well, we can't do anything for you. We can't do anything for you, because that's just devastating, and it minimizes everything that you've gone through. And
well, and for me, it was the FBI. But I had been a former Air Force officer and spent a lot of time with, with agencies up in Washington. So I understood that, but it didn't help me any. I have gone with victims on a local level. It happened during the pandemic. We couldn't get anybody to talk to us. So at that point, with Tim's suggestions, we filed a report online. We just wanted to get a report number. And we deal a lot with our victims in our steps in our support groups on what to expect when they go in there. Don't expect these guys are going to get your money back, because they're not. Just expect to speak to someone about getting a report, and then from there. And that's frustrating because, especially at the very beginning, you've lost your money, you've lost your friends, you've lost your family, you've lost everybody, and now you're being told there's nothing that they can do for you. But we need to have something, some sort of recognition. And I counseled a woman one time. I actually took her to the police department because I could feel the person that we were talking to was just laughing behind the door. If they would understand that it could be their mother, their father, their sister, son, girlfriend, whoever, it could be anybody that this happens to. And that's what when I speak, I was like, I hope it doesn't happen to you, but what if it is your mother? How would you feel if you were laughing, if you didn't take this seriously? Because it is happening to everybody at one point in their life.
Now, if I can, one of the things that is problematic is the great challenge of transmitting information to law enforcement around the United States. Now, because of our relationship with SISTA in DHS, prior to the administration change, they were very much actively involved in cybercrimes against individuals. With the administration change, that changed dramatically, so that their focus is now on infrastructure, government, and major corporations. But they were aiding us in the distribution of our guide for law enforcement to help rank and file police officers. It's a pamphlet that they can read so they can understand exactly how this works. And we've done videos on this, etc. And I'm proud to say on LinkedIn, I'm connected to several hundred police chiefs and have shared this information. I don't believe it's getting down to the rank and file officers, though. And we have no idea how to bridge that gap. So I think perhaps one of the ways in which we can do this is collaborating more with prosecutors like yourself and simply making ourselves available. We're happy to do half an hour or an hour webinar with a local police agency to train their officers. All they need to do is let us know, and we will make ourselves available. But I think that is really the key, is what Debbie was talking about, was properly setting expectations for the victims so that they go in understanding what the job of the police officer is, just to take the information, and then someone else will make a decision whether or not it's investigatable or prosecutable, and letting it flow up through the state, county, state, federal systems where it potentially can be aggregated and made use of.
I will tell you a little bit of good news, because I believe that we can have success in these cases. And so I think when I realized how big this problem was, I had to reframe my definition of success. And before, my definition of success had always been, can we arrest somebody? Can we bring someone in and hold them accountable? And I think now when I review a case to determine whether one of two things is possible. One, can I get someone in custody for this and hold them accountable? Or two, can I get some money back for these victims? And that is the great benefit of cryptocurrency, is while it is anonymous, it is traceable, and we know where that money is. And we have enjoyed some very good success in the last few cases that we've had, where we've figured out who these suspects are, and they may be out of our reach at the moment. But more importantly, we figured out where the money is, and
Right.
we've been able to do a search warrant and get that money back. So that is a fantastic success story, and what motivates us to keep going, because I just can't emphasize enough how big this problem is. And you well know that I only know 3% of how big this problem is.
Can I add one thing as far as success? From a victim's point of view, success is being heard. And
Right.
we saw that in the Dallas case. That we
Yeah.
knew she wasn't going to get any money back, but just the fact that the criminal had to hear her, because he was sitting there right in front of us talking to his defense attorney, and she looked at the judge and said, "I want him to hear me." And he did, and he looked at her, and he finally, we felt that he could put a face to what he had done, and it was probably his grandmother. Here's your grandmother. But she walked away from that just feeling so empowered because she had a voice in this now, and that's the success from our point of view.
I'm so glad to hear that, and I really, really love that story, because he had a major impact. Like, this case might have gone for 5 years had she not come down there that day and really put a face to the crime, and really put a person behind that screen that got taken advantage of, and really told a compelling story about how the devastation she suffered. I think it's so important, especially for law enforcement, that hears terrible stories every single day of people getting injured and taken advantage of and damaged physically and emotionally every day. To actually sit with a victim and hear their story is what drives us to do better, is what drives judges to make better sentencing decisions. It drives police officers to want to spend a little more time seeing what they can do with this case. So you're right. I think the connection between victims and the criminal justice system is such a key part of this process.
We saw a very active victim advocate in that case also. And I hadn't had any experience with them, and I met her and was very impressed at what she was doing in creating that. She was a liaison between the prosecutor's office and our victim. And it was so important. They became very much friends through that, however long it was, Tim. I don't even know how long, was in preparation. But we'd like to see more of that too.
For sure. We have a really active victim assistance program in Santa Clara County, and they're exceptional. They are a key part of bridging the gap between I try very hard to be I try very hard to explain the criminal justice system in a way that's understandable to victims, but they bridge the gap for what I haven't described. They have that connection with the victim that's even stronger than what I have, and it's such a key component that really enables victims to feel understood and helped.
That's important.
Are you able to relate any successful cases that you had over the last few years?
Well, to be honest, I can definitely relay stories of successfully getting money back to victims. I can definitely relay stories of getting defendants in custody. But it hasn't been necessarily the romance type scams. I can't say that it's really a relationship scam. The relationship scams, I'll tell you, the relationship scams traditionally in my office have been held by elder fraud. We have an elder fraud DA who does that, and sort of our general fraud department, because our general fraud deals with, for the longest time, it was victims actually, writing checks or wiring money. I became involved in the past few years because of the cryptocurrency aspect of it. And so our early results of this have been really good, really, really good. And not just, I mean, a very traditional relationship scam that reminds us of the old days of we're in a relationship and I need money for whatever reason, and an elderly gentleman in Santa Clara County sent hundreds of thousands of dollars that we were able to recover. And then even, you know, an engineer in Silicon Valley who met someone on a dating site and then began the very traditional pig butchering scam and lost his money. We were able to claw that back as well. So in our early days of the crypto type of these scams, we're successful. And what's interesting is they don't always result in a criminal court filing, because they're often international bad actors, and we don't get our hands on them. So so we don't have case numbers, we don't have litigation in court, we don't have the opportunity for a victim to be heard in court. But hopefully the relationship we build with the victim as we go through this process, and the fact that they're able to see some results provides a satisfactory view of this process, which isn't pleasant in any way.
But the key point there is that they reported it.
Right.
Yes.
There would be no success if they kept quiet.
Exactly.
Now, could you maybe talk a little bit about the process in the case of, say, a pig butchering relationship crypto scam? We're very intimately familiar with it, and including the kind of blockchain network analysis that takes place in order to be able to trace the transfer of the cryptocurrency through multiple wallets. But from a prosecutor's point of view, I mean, obviously the police can identify the fact that there was a crime. They can take the report. They can do some investigative work. And we know that there are assets that are available to them. Some of them are pricey and that they have to pay for in order to gain access to those tools. We're developing a partnership with a third party. I can't mention the name at the moment because this has not been done, but it will connect our reporting platform with the largest one of these blockchain intelligence groups that will allow for them automatically to receive our reports in real time, do the analysis, do the tracing, and because we insist on the victims doing a local police report, sorry about that, doing a local police report, the blockchain intelligence group will then be able to contact the local police agency and walk them through the clawback or the recovery mechanisms that they need to do. We have something similar with, thanks and courtesy to Interpol, where they have a very evolved wire transfer clawback process is available to law enforcement worldwide. All you have to do, we can't do this for law enforcement because that's not our role. We're not Interpol and we're not the blockchain folks, but often it's very confusing and very opaque what that process might look like. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Well, McGuinness, I think you just solved the whole problem I've been trying to solve, which is which is exactly that problem. So the problem is victims report. I think we've had some discussion on LinkedIn recently about some of the other stakeholders in this space doing their own reporting platform, and whether or not that's a good idea. And what I want to see is a platform that where the victims understand that this will be viewed by law enforcement, and if we can help you, we can help you. On one that I'm thinking of, just the concept that if we knew what county these people were in, I'd have a better idea if I can help you. Right. So there's a triage here. When we hear about a case, the first thing we want to look at is the age of the case. and because we all know how quickly these funds move. So an aged case is not something that is easy for us to work with. So if it's a relatively recent case, we then look to the victim to determine what information they have regarding addresses where they have sent this money. And you've talked about the tools. This is key to our ability as a whole to assist victims. So like I told you in the beginning of this, I'm part of a task force, and that task force has a state grant that enables it to buy these expensive tracing tools. And somehow we need to bridge that gap where local law enforcement cannot afford these tools, so they cannot investigate and they cannot move forward. And it sounds as though you are working to make that happen. That's a key thing that needs to happen, because we're coming from a situation in Santa Clara County where we can do this, but we can't do it for the whole United States. Our 4 people who know how to do it can't. We'd love to be able to triage everything that comes in, but we have to be selective about what we can even assist with. So we're looking for A, is there a Santa Clara County nexus in some way? And then B, once we trace this money, is it somewhere where we can get it? And if it's somewhere we can get it, then we're all in, and we do our best, and we keep in touch with the victim, and we go after that money and do our darndest to get it back. I think you should be applauded because you've identified a key bottleneck in the process that really makes it. I mean, imagine somebody in even I don't know, San Mateo, California is a victim. That's just north of me. And that county doesn't have any tracing tool. Well, that's sort of the end of the road for that victim.
And what we envisioned was a situation where the victim doesn't really need to know that this is possible, because the truth is, what we actually want the victim to believe in most cases is that the money is gone. And why would be so sinister as to suggest that? Because from a trauma recovery point of view, they have to focus on absolutes. If we don't know the money can be recovered, it's best to assume it cannot be. But then the greatest thing in the world is the Christmas present. Now, Debby got some of her money back through an FTC settlement with Western Union. But that's
not a lot of it. And they denied me part of it. And actually, once they gave me some of it, and then I had only $2,000 left, it made me more frustrated not getting that extra money, because I had all the documentation to prove that I lost it. You know? So there's good and bad. Yeah, my expectation of never getting any of it back, I was fine with that. So it was a gift when I got a little bit back. But we can't set expectations that we're going to get it back, because then the victims are going to be totally upset, devastated, and never get over that part.
Yes.
All we can do is get the victim to make the report, understanding that in the future there may be possibilities. And then if the analysis, the tracing, that network analysis of where the wallets have passed through, with the discovery that there is an end wallet that now contains this, then that can be shared with the local police department, and they don't even have to know, because then the partner organization can tell them, okay, here's your checklist of what you need to do, the warrants and orders that you're going to need, just like the Interpol bank wire transfer clawback process. And then it becomes a follow the numbers, even for little tiny law enforcement agencies around the country. But this,
Erin, can I ask a question though? Erin, do victims report to you? How does the case get sent to you from law enforcement, or are people coming into your office saying this has happened to me?
We're getting them from all kinds of different ways. So we are getting them from people are reporting to their local law enforcement. So say someone in the city of Mountain View or the city of Sunnyvale reports it. City of Sunnyvale or Mountain View says, you know what, I think this is a good one for the high-tech task force. This goes to React, and that's how we get it. But recently I've been talking about this a lot on LinkedIn, and I have gotten a lot of people to just directly reach out to me on my work email. And then I process that through React, and we triage it in the way I discussed.
Okay.
Excellent. Excellent. So for a new victim, and we have many who've been the victim of these pig butchering, or sometimes called pork chop scams, or plated pig scams, all the variations of the Chinese words. And I'm really proud to say that in 2017, I had a dinner with the Minister of State Security for the state of Guangdong in China.
Oh,
Educated them about the nature of relationship scams. He had no clue.
okay.
3 months later, he arrested 1,300 scammers within his state in China. 2 months after that, another 1,800. That was 2019. Excuse me. That was 2018. 2019, they arrested 100,000 scammers inside of China across the entirety. China has made this a mission within their state ministry. Now, good, bad China.
Well,
Last year, China arrested over 400,000 cyber-enabled criminals. Chinese citizens, both inside of China, 55,000, for example, in the little tiny country of Bhutan. But they arrest them they get local authorities to work with them. Interpol just put out a press release just a few days ago about thousands of cyber criminals that were arrested worldwide with funding provided by China. You know, as an American, all of us, this is a little bit of a sore spot because the United States is not dead last, but we're in the bottom 10%. That's a real challenge. But I think the key, as you've articulated, it's all about the reporting. If only 1% of victims are reporting, then you can only act on what is told to you, correct?
yeah. Yeah, I just worry about what's going on internationally and what still may be continued to be funded in that way.
Well, the Nigerians did a wonderful study about 2 years ago where they did a survey of every one of their universities in Nigeria. Nigeria is a country that's a little bit below the population of the United Kingdom. So it's either the largest or the second largest population in Nigeria. So they surveyed well over 100,000 students, or rather they got responses from well over 100,000 students. Every single one of those students surveyed said they were either involved in cybercrimes or they had a first relationship friend who was. There's 1.5 million university-age students in Nigeria alone. And that was the conclusion, that there is at least 2 million scammers in Nigeria alone.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the scams that have come out of the pandemic? Like, do you deal with the unemployment benefit scams that exploded in 2020, along with some of the others?
I really don't. What I've dealt with a little bit is I've dealt with a lot of ATM skimming issues, where I'd say Eastern European organizations are installing cameras in ATM kiosks and recording people's pins and recording.
And they're really well made.
Have you seen them? They're amazing.
I have.
Yeah, they're not noticeable at all. And in fact, one of my officers went to Bank of America to withdraw some money, and he looked up because he's always looking, and he's like, there it is. And he went into the bank and he said, hey, you've got a camera out here. And she's like, no, I don't. And he's like, no, you do. And she came out and they took it down, and sure enough, there it was.
Was it Wi-Fi connected?
Yeah.
So one of the things we tell people is use your cell phone because there are apps that are available which are Wi-Fi finders.
Oh, okay.
And you install that on your phone, and as you approach an ATM, the ATM is hardwired connected.
Yeah.
Landline. It's not
Yeah.
fucking Wi-Fi. But if
Yeah.
Wi-Fi signal coming from that ATM, it's been jacked.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, that's a big one. I'm trying to think. I think that, I mean, really, we've been focused on these romance and pig butchering scams. Some gas scams, but not, those don't affect really, individual citizens. They affect gas owners.
Can you talk a little bit about the demographics, the victimology of the pig butchering scams that you've encountered?
I think it's fascinating. It's exactly what you were saying. I've talked to victims who say, like, I'm pretty sophisticated tech wise. I feel like I'm pretty savvy with being skeptical of things. And I think that the demographic is fascinating because it's men, it's women. For me, I find it super interesting when I see a victim that, like, I personally can identify with. I see a lot of, like, Kevin, don't. I see a lot of super smart professional women who get caught up in a new thing and make decisions that are hard to understand unless you hear their story and understand how they got there. Young people, older people, a 20-year-old and a man in his late 70s. Like, it really runs the gamut. I feel like any of us on any given day could encounter a situation where our guard's down and we allow ourselves to make a new friend, and the next thing we know, we're taken advantage of.
Well, as we tell victims, they're not to blame for these scams because fundamentally it's our brains that work against us. The only defense is by changing your behaviors so that you never act impulsively. The only mistake the victim made was saying hello. The minute the conversation started, the grooming began.
Yep.
And with the grooming, they get them to a point where their amygdalas are hijacked, in other words, where their emotions are hijacked. So they can trigger everything, including the impulsive nature of the investment, as well as much harder core manipulation, things like gaslighting, etc. So when they've got control of a victim, and it doesn't matter so much whether it's a pig butchering scam or a traditional romance scam or a lotto scam, it's the nature of the long con.
Yes.
The mechanisms are essentially the same across the board, and it relies heavily on the victim's susceptibility due to their predefined cognitive biases. We have thousands of articles on the psychology of scams because part of the recovery process is helping to educate victims so that they understand why they were targeted, why they are a victim, why this happened to them, and so that they understand, basically, it's kind of like going to driving school finally for their brain. They understand how their brain actually brought them in. Everybody can be scammed, and you're absolutely right. Everybody will be scammed. In fact, all of us have been. Because there's really no fundamental difference between the kind of social engineering that the scammers engage in versus Madison Avenue in corporate America, or politicians for that matter. Everybody is a social engineer.
Right.
Our children are perfect social engineers and little scammers. Dogs and Cats are scammers. It's really funny to watch your dog get scammed. Bait and switch works wonderfully on pets.
Yes.
Something that's wired into us as mammals. Before we close, maybe you could just offer your advice and suggestions to new victims who've not yet reported on what to do, what to expect, and how to go forward.
Well, I think number one, I would suggest that they give themselves some grace and try to recognize, as difficult as it is, that this was not their fault and that they didn't deserve what happened to them, and that they are worthy of being helped, and they are worthy of having someone take the time to hear them out and to investigate what happened to them. I would, after they've given themselves some grace and some time to process what happened, I really urge them to come forward and tell law enforcement, so that we can get our hands around how big this problem is, where it's really coming from, what we can do about it. And I would urge them to have some persistence. You know, I love that your group exists. I love that there is a place for them to be heard and understood, counseled. It's very clear that
we don't do counseling, but we do support groups. We
right.
do support, okay. Right. Support and recovery.
Right. Right. That there's a place for them, so that, you know, don't. If you feel as though you've FBI couldn't help you, you haven't heard back from IC3, local law enforcement didn't help, keep looking out there for someone to help you, because there are people that want to help you. And just know that this is a cause worth pursuing, because I think a lot of times if they don't reach out and they aren't heard, understood, this festers and contributes to a lifelong trauma that really is difficult to manage long term and has really negative effects. So I just have tons of empathy for their situation, and I hope that they're able to find some peace in it.
Debbie?
I want to say thank you, because I'm writing notes down here, and it comes down to, I love give yourself some grace, give yourself some time. For me, it's been 10 years. And when we're on a support group and we've got victims that are like 2 or 3 months in, and they're just totally devastated and can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, that's why yours truly is here, because it's time. And the longer I've been in it, the stronger I've gotten, because I've learned more about what happened. I learned why it happened to me. I learned why it's still happening. And that's the thing that bugs me the most, is that it's happening faster today and more money's being lost today than 10 years ago.
Yes.
And it's because we haven't talked about it enough. So thank you for being the champion on your end. Thank you, Tim, and for all that SCARS is doing, because little by little, my goal 10 years ago, or however many years I've been with SCARS, is let's keep one person from getting scammed, or help one person recover thoroughly through it. And it's one person at a time, and it's really grateful when we see hundreds of people. But if we can't get them to report, none of them are gonna recover. So thank you for that.
And that's why we do these interviews.
Absolutely.
Because it's a very effective way, because literally when we post this, 1,000 people will have seen it in the next 24 hours. And it'll become available on our websites and our social media and YouTube and all of that, where literally thousands and thousands of people will see it, and hopefully they will share it, and it won't go viral in the way that some things do, but the right people will eventually find it and gain the insights that you've been able to share with us. And this truly is, this is the surprise for most people in law enforcement. This is now the world's largest crime. It's bigger than human trafficking, drugs, and terrorism combined in terms of its financial impact and impact on numbers of victims.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the UK this last year made a startling revelation in Parliament that they needed to completely reorganize their law enforcement agencies because 50% of all crimes in the UK are now fraud. We believe it is in the United States too. It's just that it's so radically underreported.
Yeah. 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 That's amazing. Well, I'm really grateful for your organization, and I'm grateful that there are two caring people like you out there doing this good work.
We are a multitude.
Lots.
Excellent.
And we're all volunteers also. So nobody in our organization draws a salary. Nobody in our organization charges for victims assistance services. We publish books. Okay, people have to pay for the books because the books cost something. But nevertheless, we are fundamentally focused on helping victims avoid, discover, recover.
Excellent. I'm grateful for you. Keep doing your good work.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate your time.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.